Okay, I'm going to get a notation tool here and we'll be ready to start in just a minute. Alright, this session is on phonological and phonemic awareness. The awareness that spoken words can be analyzed by syllable and sound, by counting, deleting, substituting, and segmenting. We will also examine phonemic awareness when it's classified as phonics, when spoken sounds are matched to written letters. While most of the newer reading programs emphasize phonemic awareness at the phonics level, fewer spend much time on the auditory precursors to decoding, the verbal analysis of spoken words at the syllable and sound level. So this module serves as a manual for developing the phonological and phonemic skills that most basals do not cover or present in a non-systematic way. All preschool and kindergarten children emerging into reading should be exposed to this sequence of phonological and phonemic skills to ensure that they have a solid understanding of the alphabetic principle of written language, how spoken sounds map to print. And if you have a kindergarten or first grade student who knows letters and sounds but can't blend or decode, this program is what he or she needs. This is what they're missing. Older students who are struggling with decoding need this sequence also, but in a more age-appropriate present way. That's the subject of another module. So let's talk about word study stages. In stage 1, successful word detectives spell words the way they sound. For example, B-O-T for boat. This is the concept that children need to be sound detectives, walking through the words by sound. At this stage, a child will write said, S-E-D for said, and W-E-Z for was. In stage 2, children come to realize that many words parts that sound alike are spelled with different letters, for example, kitten and cute, and that many word parts that sound different are spelled the same, for example, no and cow. These are the two major clues that word detectives need to internalize in order to walk through words by pattern. In stage 3, word detectives must notice the syntax and meaning clues that determine spelling. For example, spelled, danced, and wanted all sound differently at the end, but are spelled the same because they denote past tense. Sign and signal have the same root, which is spelled the same even though it's pronounced differently. Readers who have not mastered phonological and phonemic skills by mid-first grade will have trouble spelling by sound. They may be most anxious for the correct spelling or produce rather bizarre spellings. Later on, they'll learn rudimentary sound letters principles, but will be much lower than their peers in spelling unknown words phonetically. Therefore, spell checkers and electronic dictionaries are of little use to them. This represents a logical skill sequence for ensuring decoding success in reading and encoding in spelling. Notice that letters are not used in this program until a significant amount of auditory discrimination skills have mastered. You can see that phonics, phonemic awareness as phonics, begins here. In the beginning, felt squares or counters are used to represent the sound or word parts or syllables that they're manipulating. Although these are listed as kindergarten skills, first grade teachers should assess their children early in the fall to determine which need to start at or near the beginning of these sequences. Keep in mind that knowing individual letters and sounds does not mean that the child can do these important auditory manipulations of words that are needed for reading success. This is the teaching model that was used in a kindergarten first grade intervention project implemented in 21 classrooms. Children in these classrooms had been screened to determine which ones needed additional help with phonological and phonemic skills. Typically, anywhere from 30 to 50% of the children in each classroom scored in the at-risk range for decoding and reading disability. You may remember that I've stated that not all kindergarten and first grade children need systematic intensive phonics instruction. Parenthetically, keep in mind that neither did the National Reading Panel. It was primarily Reed Lyon, who called himself George Bush's reading guru, who used that mantra repeatedly. The reading panel stated that phonics is only one part of a good reading program. My belief is that some children do need intensive, systematic phonics instruction. They need steps 3 through 5, in addition to the whole group instruction of steps 1 and 2. Our experience was that all but 1 or 2 of the children in each classroom had mastered all of the skills in the sequence by the end of the year. Those 1 or 2 children continued to need more help, what would now be considered Tier 3 in the RTA model. Our project was conducted in 1989, long before RTI entered our lexicon. Some children need a moderate amount of phonics instruction. For them, steps 1 and 2 may be sufficient, but often they will need to participate in the small group extra help for the first 4 to 6 months of school. That was our experience with the 21 classrooms in this project. This would be considered Tier 2 interventions in RTI. So let's begin with segmentation. Ball and Blackman in 1989 demonstrated that direct teaching of phonological analysis of sounds and words was an effective way to intervene and prevent or reduce reading failure. Their work has been replicated both with small groups and with whole classrooms. For reference, review the first part of Chapter 2 in your NRP book. Incidentally, I met with Eileen Ball in one of the Chicago Southside schools where she was conducting her kindergarten small group interventions using chips to represent syllables and sounds. She was surprised by how much further along the phonological phonemic continuum our Wisconsin children were compared to our inner city children. So maybe Garrison didn't get it right that only Minnesota children are above average. In any case, we had plenty of children who needed the same kinds of learning activities that Eileen was providing to her kindergarten students. Segmenting begins from sentences to words, from words to syllables, and words to phonemes. Let's talk about segmentation of sentences. Incidentally, you should be aware that Jose Murray, who has investigated pre-literate societies, has found that in societies that do not have written words, often they don't have a word for word. Their equivalent phrase is saying, which makes sense because a saying is a sentence. In any case, to do this exercise, you're going to need to make an overhead of the apple or some other place marker, like a leaf in the fall or Christmas tree in the spring, in the winter, of course, or a clown, and a line underneath for sliding the markers down as you model a first spoken sentence. These serve as placeholders for markers. For markers, you can use bingo chips, washers, goldfish crackers, etc. First, you model the process by saying the sentence, for example, John runs, and moving one chip at a time. John runs. This is runs. This is John. John runs. Children should also be asked to point to the marker that represents a word. For example, if you're having them do I ran home, you could say point to home, point to I, point to ran. And he, oops, need to get my pencil back. He is tall. Point to is, point to he, point to tall. Generally, 2, 3, and 4-word sentences. 4-word sentences are sufficient for children to get the idea of representing spoken language with markers. And usually they only need a few lessons in this. It's used primarily to teach children the basic process for analyzing parts of words, syllables, and sounds. In segmentation of syllables, you want to begin with compound words like football, baseball, baseball, point to base, point to ball. What happens if you take away the base? What is left? What you have left is the ball. You can use the words big parts and syllables until children understand the concept of syllables. Some children will need extended practice with this phonological skill before moving to segmentation of sounds. Develop lists of 1, 2, 3, and some 4-syllable words, not too many, for practice. If you print out this module as note pages, you can write your words below the slide. The next part is segmentation and deletion of sounds. You model the slide down sounds on the overhead and then point to each sound. Notice that you're sliding down a marker, not a letter. So you have s, a, t, s, a, t. Point to a, point to t, point to s. Some sounds are difficult to make in isolation. For example, b. Practice this in order to avoid adding an as in b. Say b. After children have mastered slide-down sounds, you can begin to delete beginning or ending sounds. For example, take away s from sat, and what do you have? A, at, at. Okay. Children love to do this activity with goldfish crackers if you tell them to make the s disappear. That way they get to eat it. It's a great way to end a lesson by having them eat the sounds. 2, 3, and 4 sound words are sufficient for mastery of this skill. Be sure they're 1-syllable words, or you're going to have some children syllabicating rather than listening for each sound. Also, keep in mind that it does not matter how many letters are in the word, only the sounds. For example, church has 6 letters, but only 3 sounds. On the other hand, you probably remember from your linguistics pretest in 600 that fox has only 3 letters, but 4 sounds. And keep in mind also the phoneme A can have as many as 4 graphemes, A-I-G-H. Words with blends are more difficult to separate into sounds, so save these for challenge to test mastery of the skill. Distinguishing sounds is also an important thing for children of this age. Remember that until age 7½, children make decisions on what vowel they hear more by where the vowel is made in the mouth than how it sounds. And so this is an exercise that helps them to hear and distinguish the difference between sounds that are the same and sounds that are different, and especially between noisy and quiet brothers, or voiced and unvoiced sounds. So for example, we have lip poppers, p, b, where b is the voiced or the noisy brother. You also have tip tappers that are made at the tip, with the tip of your tongue at the top of your mouth. T, d. So again, d is the noisy brother. And then you have the scrapers, where the sound scrapes from the back of your throat. K, g. Children love the nose sounds or the nasals because you can have them hold their nose, and if it's nasal, the sound is going to stop. So, for example, if you say "s" and they pinch their nose, they can keep saying that. But if you say, now do and it stops, they love to do that. In fact, adults love it too. And then you have the windy sounds where the wind comes out as you're saying those sounds. And as we learned in 600, we have the vowel staircase from the front to the back of the mouth. I, are pretty much in front. Are in the back and with your mouth more open. Remember that in teaching you want to separate by alternating between a front and a back sound. Counting syllables and sounds is also an important activity. Many teachers do this by clapping, but the problem with clapping syllables is that it disappears, the sounds disappear. So clapping's a nice activity as you line the children up for lunch, but it doesn't leave a visual memory trace for how many syllables or sounds. So try it yourself. Clap pedestrian. Now quick, tell me how many syllables it has. I'll bet you couldn't do this without counting on your fingers as you said the syllables. And for the same reason, we want the kids to do that. Be careful to count only the sounds heard, not the numbers of letters. For example, feet has only 3 sounds, although as adults we know that it has 4 letters. These are called Elkonin boxes because they're named for the Russian psychologist who first described this way of analyzing spoken words by sounds through the use of markers. Children are asked to place a marker for each sound heard in a word. For example, ooh, and to count the number of sounds. Note again that the number of sounds in a word may not match the number of letters. Memory span in young children is generally 5 items. Therefore, avoid words with more than 5 sounds. Using children's names, that is short ones, nicknames, animals, or toys provides interest. Notice as we're going through this that we're still using no letters, even if the children already know their letters and can match some of the letters to the sounds. It's very important that they master these pre-alphabetic skills if they're going to be able to blend and decode later on. This is a very important skill that I do not see emphasized in class in basals. For this exercise, a picture of something that has a definite beginning, middle, and end is best for visual representation. For example, a dog with lines dividing his head, torso, and hindquarter, or this train. It has an engine, a boxcar, and a caboose. You want to use 3 sound words for this exercise. Again, the number of letters does not necessarily correspond to the number of sounds. You need to forget about your visual channel for words and regress back to your auditory channel. So here's an example for the sound E. Beat. Where do you hear E in beat? E. So the child would put the chip there. And then, where do you hear the sound E in tree? E. This one's going to be tough for young kids because it's tr with a blend, TR. And it's at the end. Okay, and one more. Where do you hear the sound in east? East, east. And they would put the chip at the beginning. Keep in mind as you work with rhyming that there are 3 levels of rhyming skills represented by the 3 different learning activities in this slide. At level 1, children appreciate hearing rhyming words, and this happens quite early, even before children come to school often. They cannot recognize or produce rhymes, Mother Goose, other books, and songs with rhymes can be used to reinforce their perception of rhyme, their appreciation of it. At level 2, children can recognize words that rhyme, that is, words that sound the same at the end. Rhyming games at level 2 should use pictures that children can manipulate, for example, on a flannel board or whiteboard, playing the odd man out, jacks, tracks, fox, for example, which one doesn't belong. Level 3 occurs when children can delete a sound at the beginning of a spoken word, then substitute another sound. If you consult the phonemic awareness sequence, this skill comes in quite late in the process, really just before beginning to do phonics. The reason for that is because children need to be able to delete and substitute sounds, which are late developing skills, in order to produce rhymes. So, for example, names are excellent for this, for producing rhymes. Kids love to change the first letter of their names to make new ones. Now we're going to talk about moving into phonics. This will be when you first introduce letters, phonemic awareness as phonics. Although it's been traditional to teach letter names first in kindergarten, then the sounds of letters, research indicates that teaching letter sound matches first is more beneficial for getting children started with reading. Nor should the letters be presented in alphabetical order. The following pages are going to suggest a sequence for teaching letter sound, that is, grapheme phoneme correspondences, based on research about how easy and difficult each letter sound is for children to master. Many children will come to kindergarten knowing all or most of the letter names, and will give letter names when asked for the sound. Just reinforce that we're working with sounds for now. Teaching phonemic awareness, there are some very important principles to keep in mind as you teach phonemic awareness as phonics. First of all, I've already mentioned, teach sounds of the letters before the names of the letters. Begin with high-frequency letters. They're going to be designated as 2 stars in the slides that come. You want to, in the beginning, separate confusing consonants like p, d, n. Notice how b, d come very close in the alphabet, n come immediately next to each other, which is another reason why you wouldn't do it just by alphabet. You want to separate your often confused vowels, the a, I, that are produced in the front of the mouth. And you want to go a, ah, for example. And later on, you want to call attention to these minimal pairs by where they're made and how they're made. How is made differently than research indicates that knowledge of sound letter correspondences contributes to decoding performance, but not knowledge of letter names. For example, how does knowing H help a child pronounce hat? An excellent program for teaching the skills that are coming up next is Letterland. If you go to www.letterland.com, you'll be able to see how they teach letter sounds and the letters that go with it. The following slides combine high-frequency consonants with one short vowel in 5 sets. This means that children can read and write words within the first few weeks of the program. Perhaps I should spend a little time answering an objection by some kindergarten teachers who feel that going beyond the names and sounds of letters is not developmentally appropriate for kindergarten children. My answer would be that to teach only letters and sounds is, in fact, abstract and developmentally inappropriate. To me, to teach letters and sounds in isolation is like teaching children to count to 10 and recognize the numbers to 10, but never showing them how to count things. I recommend that about 40% of the books available to kindergarten and first grade reading be decodable. That is, books that have a high number of words that illustrate phonic principles. For example, Hop on Pop by Dr. Seuss is a great one for ah. Teachers may need to develop their own books if the decodable books available present too many patterns at once or are just too inane. My favorites for nice illustrations and some semblance of storyline are from Modern Curriculum Press. ReadingA2Z.com also has downloadable phonics readers for a price. Subscriptions are available for individuals and by classroom. Here's the first set. Letters in each set are identified according to their frequency of occurrence and consistency of pronunciation. The 33 most frequently appearing letters are double-starred, the 33% moderately used letters, and the last 33% that have no stars, which occur least frequently in primary writings. This set contains 3 continuants that are either high frequency, s, or medium frequency. Stop consonants are included to facilitate recognition of sounds in both initial and final position and for word building exercises. Be careful not to add to p, and t. Both of these are unvoiced stop consonants. So here's some linguistic terms to remember. S are continuants, t, p are stop consonants, and both of the stop consonants are unvoiced. Teach each sound letter combination until mastered. Children will enjoy bringing small objects or tiny pictures for sound show and tell, and then adding them to sound charts. I use a lot of Scotch tape for this activity. Instead of taping or gluing on charts, you may want to mount a berry basket below each letter and have children deposit the object or picture in the correct basket. This is useful for testing by removing objects and having children replace them where they belong. And of course, those of you who have smart boards in your rooms will immediately see some uses for objects with a. You may want to pause here to write words that can be read and written as soon as the children have mastered these 6 sound letter matches. There's a lot of them, and the 3 rhymes will help you get a start. Note that the vowel in this set, ah, is made near the back of the mouth and with the mouth open, in contrast to the first vowel, ah. This helps children distinguish between words with these 2 vowels. Recall from what I said earlier and from your linguistics study in EDRD 600 that children are generally not able to distinguish the difference auditorily between short vowels until age 7 to 7.5. Before that, they distinguish differences by where in the mouth the sound is made. Onset rhyme charts could be represented as word family houses. Drawings of houses could be used to house the separate word families. You could also use small milk cartons as word family mailboxes and let children mail words that they find in books. Pulling out the mail and reading each day would make a great warm-up activity. In teaching analytic phonics, which is what you do when you use onset rhymes, taking the word apart by pieces, Pecci, 1983, represents that beginning readers be encouraged to cover the first letter of a word and ask, what's the family? And then uncover the first letter and ask, what's the clue? Building word exercises, that is, writing words by sound or synthetic phonics, should use only 3-letter words. Note that D was introduced and mastered in set 2 before introducing B. Likewise, P and B. In this set, you have a minimal pair, K, G. If you have taught the noisy brothers, quiet brothers before, this is a good time to call attention to minimal pairs in the distinguishing sounds activity. Ask children to listen for differences, to think about where and how they make the sound. Sound charts from the ADD or LIPS kit or small mirrors are helpful for distinguishing sounds. recall that the ADD, auditory discrimination in depth, that is, not ADD as we know it, or the LIPS program talks about noisy brothers and quiet brothers to help children distinguish voiced b, g, from unvoiced p, k, t. By the way, once you have introduced the second set and they've mastered it, it goes without saying that you can use any of the words, the sounds and the rhymes from the first set. By now you would have 3 sets of sounds, letter sound, correspondences, and rhymes to mix and match. Here's sound letter matching for set number 4. Notice now that you have only a couple of letter sound matches that are even moderately used, and you're now getting into the less frequently used letters and sounds in primary writing. And when you get to set 5, it has all low frequency sound letter correspondences. You're going to want to review all your sound letter correspondences to assess mastery. And if you've been doing a lot of the exercises and learning experiences that we talked about before, they will know this. A good exercise is word building using all 5 short vowels. This is also a good time to extend your word family walls. And analysis of your children's spontaneous writing is going to reveal their mastery of sound letter correspondences. So this is what you teach. Now let's talk about how you teach it, the learning activities for each of your set of letters and rhymes. First of all, you want to do slide down sounds. You want to make and read word walls, do some onset rhyme bulletin boards, learning stations. Tachistoscopes at learning stations are a great way to reinforce this. Word dictation, sound spelling, reading decodable books, and encouraging sound spelling during writer's workshop. The next set of slides is going to explain each of these. Now you're going to be working on slide down sounds. Note that the teacher here doesn't say what letter makes the sound of letters don't make sounds. And the letters are how the sounds are written or represented. This way of talking about the association between letters and sounds represents a major change in our vocabulary and way of thinking. Notice that this is the first time that letters are introduced in the slide down sounds activity. They should be using the sounds that are represented by the letters, not their names. This is generally not a problem in classes that use the Letterland program, since the letters have names that correspond to their sounds. For example, Bouncy Ben. If children already know the names of letters, remind them to say the sound, not the letter name. Notice that markers are used to represent letters that have not yet been learned. Children are always analyzing letter-sound matches in words, not in isolation. Before we go on, imagine that you know only these 3 letter-sound combinations. Represent after. I'll do that here for you. Oop. I'm going to have to get my pen back. Okay. That was supposed to be after. Okay, now how about laugh? Okay, so notice that they be sliding down markers for and then sliding down for the you could also do words like Sam, so you would go and this would be the marker. Okay. In the last activity, you were teaching phonics synthetically, helping children build words sound by sound. This activity is analytic phonics, starting with a whole word and taking it apart by onset rhymes. Ask children to search their current storybooks for new words to add to the word families. Here's a little review of your linguistics concepts from 600. Word families are now called onset rhymes in the professional literature. An onset is the first sound or cluster of consonant sounds in a syllable or a one-syllable word. The rhyme is the rest of the syllable or word. If you would like to have find a great book on these kinds of activities, Barbara Fox on word identification. She's got some excellent ideas for teaching phonics analytically. Here's another analytical phonics way to extend knowledge of onsets and rhymes. They can pick up note cards and print a word on the word wall train, and whenever they encounter one in their reading, they can tuck it into the flat car if you have a slit right here for the cards to fit in, and you can pull them out and read them. Another analytic exercise, this really works well with whiteboards at a learning center, and if you have a whiteboard that has word, non-word on it in boxes drawn on permanent marker, it'll make it reusable without having to replace papers every day and kill a tree. As they pull a sound through the tachistoscope, they write it either under word or not a word. Now, I know that tat is a word, as in tatting, which is like crocheting, but it's highly unlikely that children will know that this is a word. Here's another kind of a tachistoscope that uses a letter wheel with a paper fastener. Again, this is an analytic phonics activity. Now we're going to move back to synthetic phonics. This is the first word building exercise, and you can introduce this as soon as your children master set number 2. These exercises use 3-letter short vowel words. It's also important to begin with 2 vowels that are made in different parts of the mouth. For example, ah, it's made in the beginning, and ah. Here's my pretty poorly drawn octopus. It's made in the back of the mouth. Okay, so for example, if I as teachers say, listen, sat, listen to sat. It's sat. Does it go under apple or octopus? Sat. And the children would write sat. Okay, now let's try top. Up. You're going to put up under top or top octopus. And then up. Notice that this is synthetic phonics. Research indicates that children who arrive in first grade with lower levels of phonological and phonemic skills profit most from synthetic phonics. However, they should also be exposed to analytic phonics, onset rhymes. Children who have moderate or advanced levels of phonological skills at entrance do well with analytic phonics as well as the synthetic phonics in word building. After your children have learned all 5 letter sound sets, you can use this sheet for dictation. This is a good time to talk about how the short vowels go down a staircase in our mouths as we say them. I, and then our mouth opens more with each vowel step. You can use some small mirrors that will help children see where they're making the individual vowel sounds. You can get unbreakable small mirrors from Curriculum Associates. As you progress through the letter sound sets, point out onset rhyme patterns in books and nursery rhymes, and have children read the books to you, the words to you, the onset rhyme words that they know. Language experience stories also present numerous activities to point out decodable words. For example, The sun is shining today. We had fun at the farm. You could ask students to find the words that end in un. Children also like to write silly dictations. For example, I set my wet pet on the net. Dr. Seuss books are wonderful models for children-created dictations. These can also be inspiration for creating illustrations and class books. Although Dr. Seuss wrote his books to be high frequency rather than decodable, many do feature rhyme patterns that reinforce the learning sequence presented in this model. My favorite decodable books are from Modern Curriculum Press. A Rat in a Hat has been around for at least 39 years, based on my experience teaching LD. Only the pictures are new. The sequence of this series closely matches the sets of grapheme-phoneme correspondences that we've been talking about. Please keep in mind that although many teachers do not like decodable books, children do, because they can read them by themselves. So they are great books for children's read-by baskets once the letter-sound combinations are mastered. As children learn to recognize letter-sound correspondences, they should be encouraged to spell by sound as they write. Remember the NRP finding that phonological awareness results in larger effect sizes for spelling than for reading in kindergarten and first grade? It's been observed for a long time that children can spell words that they cannot yet read. Writing leads to reading in the early stages, and it's very important to not short-circuit the child's exploration of how sound maps to print by spelling the words for them. Instead, model the sounds of the word and congratulate the child when he spells each of the sounds. Two effective ways to lead children to reading through writing are language experience and Jim Henry's approach to Writer's Workshop. This is not a spelling by sound activity per se, but it does reinforce letter-sound recognition. When I was a young teacher, I was greatly influenced by Sylvia Ashton Werner and Jeanette Veach, two early proponents for having children dictate stories and then using these stories to teach reading. When I taught kindergarten, first grade special education, we ended each day with a story of what had happened that day. The next morning I read it to and with the children, then reinforced concepts of print and letter sound matches with questions like these. I must confess that I wasn't very systematic about which skills to emphasize when, but the parents enjoyed the big books that contained the stories, which children could take turns checking out to read at home. So you could have them circle all the words, letters, excuse me. How many are in the beginning? Whoops, I need another one here. How many are in the middle? How many are in the end? You have a summary of Jim Henry's approach to Writer's Workshop in your 601 course pack. His book, which is no longer in print but still available through Amazon, is a wonderful guide for using journals with young children. His Writer's Workshop always starts with a 5-minute overhead lesson. You might want to use smartboards now, where he often models sound spelling. Notice that the only editing is that which occurs spontaneously as children share their writing with each other. He calls that travel with a pencil because as they read to each other they may see something or hear something that they want to change. This is the only kind of editing that you should expect at first grade level. These Writer's Workshop examples are from a first grade class near the end of this first semester. Notice how sophisticated these children are in representing how sound maps to print. Stephanie is especially advanced. While she still writes bird, B-R-D, by sound, many of her words are orthographically correct or contain spelling patterns characteristic of stage 2, spelling by pattern. Spelling by pattern is the subject of our next module, and this concludes our tour from preschool phonological awareness to kindergarten first grade stage 1, spelling by sound.